There is a bird at your feeder right now. Maybe a house finch, one of the regulars. Maybe a small flock of American goldfinches working the Niger tube. Maybe a mourning dove on the platform below, picking up what fell. And it's possible, not certain, but genuinely possible, that one of those birds is already infected with something. I know that's not the morning you wanted. It wasn't what I wanted either when I started looking into this about 2 years ago. Welcome to the Maple Shadow. Today, I'm going deep on feeder disease, how it moves, what the data actually shows, and what a real cleaning protocol requires. Subscribe if you're new. And stay until the end, because the last section is the one that changed what maintaining feeders means to me. I've been running feeders in my Northern Virginia yard for about 5 years now. 2 tube feeders, a sweat cage, a heated bird bath, a platform station near the oak. For a long time, I thought I understood what I was doing. Fill them up, birds come, you watch, you feel good. I thought it was uncomplicated. For the first 2 years, I didn't ask what was happening at those feeders between the times I was watching. Here's what I know now. A typical backyard tube feeder in the mid-Atlantic gets visited by 20 to 40 individual birds per day. House finches, black-capped chickadees, white-breasted nuthatches, Carolina wrens, house sparrows, American goldfinches, birds from different territories, from across a radius of several city blocks, all visiting the same 6 perch positions in sequence over the course of a morning. They land, they eat, they leave. Then the next bird lands in the exact same spot, on the same perch, on the same seed tray, with whatever the previous bird left behind. This is not a reason to take the feeder down. But there is something real happening at those surfaces that most people in this hobby have never been told. And there is something specific and genuinely not that hard that you can do about it. In the wild, a black-capped chickadee has a home range of roughly 10 to 12 acres during the breeding season. A house finch might travel a few hundred yards on a typical foraging day, occasionally more. These birds spread out. They forage across a range of habitat. The likelihood of 2 house finches from different parts of a neighborhood spending more than a few seconds on the same branch is low. Add a tube feeder, and all of that changes. Suddenly, you have birds from across several city blocks, all visiting the same small set of surfaces in sequence over 2 to 3 hours each morning. A shared surface that gets touched, perched on, and defecated near dozens of times before 9 a.m. A surface that doesn't wash itself in the rain the way vegetation does, doesn't decompose the way a natural food source would, doesn't move. Researchers call this the congregation effect. When you concentrate animals at a point they wouldn't otherwise share, you create conditions for pathogens to transfer between them. This is not a theory. It is the mechanism behind disease clustering wherever shared touchpoints exist, and it is active at your feeder right now, at whatever scale today happens to bring. Stay with me here, because what comes next is what most people in this hobby have never been told. Between 6:30 and 9 in the morning on a typical fall day in the mid-Atlantic, the birds cycling through a well-stocked tube feeder aren't just neighbors from the same territory. They're strangers. Birds from completely separate winter ranges sharing a surface for 2-3 seconds at a time. Long enough to leave something, long enough to pick something up. There are 3 main pathogens that researchers track at backyard feeders here in the East. They're different in how they look, how they spread, and what you can do about them. The first one you may have already seen. House finch eye disease, mycoplasmal conjunctivitis, caused by a bacterium called Mycoplasma gallisepticum. If you've watched your feeder carefully over the years, you've probably seen a bird with red, crusty, swollen eyes, eyes that looked sealed half shut, a bird sitting at the feeder longer than it should, a little disoriented, slower than the others, a bird that, when a Cooper's hawk came through and scattered everything else, didn't quite make it off the perch in time. That's this disease. Cornell Lab of Ornithology has been tracking it since 1994, when the pathogen jumped from domestic poultry populations into wild house finches on the East Coast. Within a few years, it had spread across the continent. The work coming out of Cornell's Project Feeder Watch, which has been monitoring feeder bird populations through citizen science since 1987, documented house finch population declines of between 25 and 60% in specific eastern regions during the worst years of the outbreak. Not all from the disease directly. Some birds died from cold they were too weakened to handle. Some were taken by predators they could no longer evade. But the feeder was the transmission hub in virtually every documented cluster. Mycoplasma gallisepticum spreads through direct contact, bird to bird, but more consistently, bird to surface to bird. The perches, the seed tray, the ports where seed comes out. A sick bird lands, leaves material from infected tissue, the next bird lands in that spot. It isn't a fast process, it is a reliable one. That's the direct contact. Then there's what happens on the ground below. Salmonellosis. Salmonella typhimurium spreads through fecal contamination, droppings in the seed tray, droppings in the hull debris accumulating on the ground below the feeder, contaminated water in the bath. The birds most commonly affected in backyard settings are pine siskins and common redpolls. During eruption winters, when these species move through the eastern United States in large numbers, the disease can tear through a yard fast. The National Wildlife Health Center documented mass mortality events in pine siskins in 2021 that researchers traced to feeder transmission, multiple dead birds at a single feeder site. I've never seen that at my feeders. I hope you haven't. But the conditions that produce those events are the same conditions, at a smaller and invisible scale, that produce transmission you'd never notice. And if it's not the seed tray or the ground, it's the water. Trichomonosis. Caused by a protozoan called Trichomonas gallinae, it produces lesions in the throat and mouth of affected birds. American goldfinches, house finches, and mourning doves are all vulnerable. The lesions make it impossible to swallow. The bird can pick up seed, it just can't get the seed down. If you've ever seen a bird at your feeder that seemed to be struggling, repeatedly dropping seed, not flying when the others did, that may have been what you were watching. Trichomonosis spreads most efficiently through shared water, a bird bath that isn't being cleaned. It wasn't airborne. It wasn't something these birds would encounter at this rate in the wild. It wasn't random bad luck that one bird showed up sick. It was the surface, the same surface visited by dozens of birds over days and weeks, not being cleaned, that allowed all three of these pathogens to persist and move. Here's where I want to be honest with you about something uncomfortable. About 2 years ago, I actually looked at my feeders. Really looked. I pulled the platform station out from under the oak and examined what had accumulated in the tray. There was a compacted, damp layer of seed hulls pressed into the corners. It had been building since September. Underneath it was a dark discoloration that I didn't need a biology degree to know was mold. The tube feeders were better, but the perches had visible staining at every contact point. The bird bath, I'd been refilling it regularly, but I hadn't actually cleaned the bowl in close to a month. I had been maintaining, without realizing it, a moderately efficient disease transmission point. I'm telling you this because I don't want what comes next to land as a lecture. I know how the list gets long. I know clean the feeder slides below other things. But here's what changed how I thought about it. I had always told myself that maintaining feeders was a net positive for the birds. And mostly it is. But work published in the Journal of Wildlife Diseases is clear that feeder-associated pathogen transmission is not a rare fringe outcome. It's a predictable one. High contact rates on shared surfaces that aren't being cleaned will produce transmission. The more birds you attract, the more important the cleaning becomes. You're not just failing to help when you let the feeder go. You may be actively creating a problem. I felt bad about this for about a week. The feeling didn't clean a single feeder. What I did next is what matters. The research picture on feeder disease has gotten significantly clearer in the last decade, and what it shows is both more serious and more manageable than most people expect. The study I keep coming back to is work published in PNAS in the early 2000s, tracking the spread of Mycoplasma gallisepticum through eastern house finch populations. What the researchers found was not just that the disease spread at feeders, they found it spread with unusual efficiency. The congregation effect wasn't a contributing factor. It was the mechanism. Modeled interventions that reduced contact rates on shared surfaces, even partial cleaning, even irregular cleaning, produced meaningful reductions in transmission rates. Not elimination, meaningful reduction. Cornell's Project FeederWatch data adds something worth sitting with. The regions where house finch conjunctivitis was noticed earliest and responded to by feeder owners first showed faster local house finch population recovery than regions where the disease moved through unmonitored. Not a dramatic difference, a real one. Pay attention to this. You are not a passive observer of your feeder. What you notice and what you do about it connects to something larger than your yard. A citizen science network that has been showing for nearly 4 decades that attentive people make a measurable difference. So, what do you actually do? I'm going to be specific because the vague version of this advice, clean your feeders regularly, is what most people already hear and still don't act on. Here's the protocol I use, based on guidelines from Cornell Lab and the National Wildlife Disease Program. Every 1 to 2 weeks, the feeders come down. The solution is simple. 1 part household bleach, 9 parts water. You scrub the contact surfaces, the tubes, the perches, the ports. You rinse completely. And then, this is the part people skip, you let it dry. All the way. Wet seed in a damp feeder grows mold quickly, and moldy seed carries aspergillosis, a fungal infection that gets directly into a bird's respiratory system. Dry completely, then refill. For platform feeders, the kind where birds stand directly in the tray, clean every week during humid months, May through September in most of the eastern United States. Platform feeders catch droppings more directly than tubes and hold moisture. That combination is what you don't want. As I'm recording this in early summer, I'm already watching what a week of mid-Atlantic humidity does to seed in that platform tray. You would not want to eat from it. The bird bath gets cleaned every 2 to 3 days, not refilled, cleaned. Add fresh water daily, but twice a week, that bowl gets scrubbed with the bleach solution and fully rinsed before you put water back in it. Trichomonas gallinae doesn't need a neglected bath to survive. It needs a shared one. Hull debris, fallen seed, droppings on the ground below the feeder, remove it every 2 weeks. Mourning doves and other ground-feeding birds spend real time in that zone. That's where fecal-oral transmission is most direct. Now, the hardest rule. If you see a sick bird at your feeder, swollen or crusty eyes, unusual lethargy, a bird staying at the perch when everything else is scattered, take all your feeders down for 2 weeks, not just the one near that bird. All of them. This is not punishment. The sick bird will find somewhere else to forage. Your feeders, taken offline, cleaned, and put back up after 2 weeks, stop being the transmission point they were. That is the specific intervention the research supports. 2 weeks, then a clean surface back in play. I know 2 weeks feels wrong. 4 winters in, the thought of taking them down still feels wrong to me. But it is what works. I've saved this for last because it's the part that changed what maintaining feeders means to me, and I think it might do the same for you. About 6 weeks ago, on a cold Tuesday morning in late January, I was standing at the kitchen window with my first cup of coffee, watching the feeder near the oak. The chickadee pair I think of as the Tuesday couple has been coming to that feeder every Tuesday morning for 4 winters now. Same hour, same feeder. I've watched them long enough that their behavior has a shape to it. Nothing I could quite describe, just the way that anything you pay close attention to starts to have a pattern you recognize without being able to name it. One of them came in, grabbed a seed, flew to the maple. Normal. The second one landed at the perch and stayed. 30 seconds. Didn't take anything. Then it picked up a seed and just held it. Then it shook its head, twice in a way I hadn't seen before. I'm still trying to figure out what to make of that morning. It could have been nothing. Maybe it was cold. Maybe I read something into a normal moment that wasn't there. I genuinely don't know. What I did was put down the coffee, go outside, take both tube feeders and the platform station down, bring them inside, and run them through the bleach cleaning protocol. Bird bath, too. Left everything down for 4 days to dry completely. The second chickadee didn't show up for about a week. Then it was back. A Tuesday later, same hour, same feeder, same pattern. Normal. I can't tell you the cleaning saved that bird. I have no idea if it was actually sick or if taking those feeders down for 4 days changed a single thing. What I can tell you is that the research gave me a reason to act, and I had a bird I'd been watching for 4 winters, and those two things together were enough. This is not about guilt. This is not about maintaining feeders perfectly every week without fail. This is not about pulling the feeders down every month out of some abstract abundance of caution. This is about knowing one specific thing, that the surface your birds share matters, and making sure something simple gets done about it regularly. Every bird that visits your yard is making a small decision, not conscious the way we mean that word, but real, built on whether that space is worth the risk, whether the food is reliable, whether the last time they were here was safe. The Tuesday couple has been making that decision in favor of my feeder for 4 winters running, in a neighborhood full of other feeders and other choices. I don't have great words for what that means, but I know what it means to have a responsibility to it. The feeder you maintain is a commitment, a small one, a real one, and knowing what moves through that feeder and knowing exactly what to do about it means that commitment now has some weight behind it. I said at the start of this video that there might be a bird at your feeder right now that's already infected. That's still true. It will probably always be a little true because that's the nature of a wild bird population sharing a space you've created. What's also true is that you now know what that means and you know what to do. Every 1 to 2 weeks, 1 part bleach, 9 parts water. Rinse completely. Dry completely. Refill. 2 weeks offline if you see something that worries you. Eyes on the bird bath. None of this is hard. Most of it just needs to be on your calendar. Have you ever seen a bird at your feeder that looked sick? The eyes, the posture, the way it sat there longer than it should have? Tell me what you've seen down in the comments. I read every one, every single one. I'll see you in the next one.